Hello everyone, my name is Zarir and welcome to my Ultimate Beginner's Guide for World War III. Now even if you're somewhat of a veteran of this game, I would still highly recommend watching this video to the end, as you could still learn something new. There are a lot of nitty-gritty details to this game that I feel like even longtime players of the game just don't see right away, if ever. So the aim of this video is to point those things out to you, so both veterans and beginners can get the best gaming experience out of World War III. So what we're going to be discussing today are your kill streaks, or point streaks, as I like to call them, that I highly recommend you use. Then we'll dive into my weapon recommendations and what attachments I recommend for each one. And then we'll get into gadgets and equipment. Then I'm going to drop into an empty online Warzone server, since you can't really go into an offline server in the current build of the game. And I'll be explaining how you can train your aim in warm-up, what the rules of Warzone are, and I'll be ending the video by giving my #1 tip for Warzone matches. So be sure to stick around to the very end of the video for that. So to get started, when you first enter World War III, you're hit with this war map, and it looks pretty tactical and cool. You can switch actually between satellite and this sort of tactical view where you kind of have Red Army versus NATO over here. What we're going to be hitting up right here is the Customize tab right here. And what you see pretty much right away is this, Soldier Customization. Now, keep in mind, any cosmetics that you choose for this are purely cosmetic. For visuals, these are purely cosmetic, but they do cost like your in-game money. So what I would recommend is actually holding off on this for a second and try to spend your money instead on the equipment. So when you first see this, it's very similar actually to a sort of Call of Duty loadout setup where you have classes and you can choose the guns and equipment and kill streaks for that particular class. So if you've played Call of Duty before, this menu shouldn't look too unfamiliar. Now over here, you'll notice that there are 4 classes, but you actually have 8, because in the bottom right here, there's actually a second page, and boom, you go over to that and you have 4 other classes that you can customize, which is very nice. So I'll be using this sort of 6th loadout here that I've made for myself as an example to showcase guns that you can choose and how you can build them to suit your preferences. So for beginners, I would highly recommend starting out with this game's version of the H&K 416. It just calls it M416. As soon as you click on the gun, you'll notice that you have a few tabs here. There's an attachments tab, a body parts tab, and an add-ons tab. At the moment, in the current build of the game, you can just put a little emblem on here. I've got fellow YouTuber Doom49's little sticker on my gun. I like his content, so we go with that. We'll move straight into the attachments. So first you have a primary and secondary sight. I would not recommend even using a secondary sight. When you first start the game, you'll have kind of a default iron sight set up like this. What you want to do is completely get rid of that by hitting clear, and it's gone. I would recommend just using a primary reflex sight of some sort. If you try to use higher end optics on especially like basic assault rifles, you're going to end up having a hard time because they just don't do that much damage at range. You're better off just putting on a kind of a 1x iron sight and just kind of running into buildings aggressively, trying to take out enemies that way. And even if you're not a more aggressive player like me, reflex sights still give overall better visibility and usability of your gun when you try to ADS. So I would recommend just going with collimators and hollow sights and just kind of picking a 1x scope of your choosing. Holographics I'm not a big fan of just because they obscure more of the screen than something like this. A good all-arounder I would recommend is actually this SCRD23 red dot sight. It looks really kind of futuristic and it still provides good visibility. And in the middle of it, you actually have, it's hard to see here, but you actually have kind of an actual crosshair instead of a dot. So if that helps you, you can use that instead. But I prefer my actual just dot. Now the big thing you'll notice is over here is there's a weight system actually in this game. To the left of the white line, you're at a lightweight loadout. To the left of the yellow line, you're at a medium weight loadout between white and yellow. And between yellow and red, you're in a heavy loadout. I would recommend maxing out your weight as much as possible, just so that you have as much useful stuff on you as possible. You won't move as quickly, but I'll be showing you some little movement hacks that you can use to kind of get around this later on. Now, my number one tip for building a gun, particularly an assault rifle in World War III, is to minimize the recoil as much as you possibly can. In the current build of the game, not all attachments really serve a purpose. If you come from a game like Escape from Tarkov, in that game literally every possible attachment serves to change the gun's stats in some kind of way. There's nothing that's just purely cosmetic. In this game, there are some things that are just cosmetic, and you can change those as you please. But for the actual functional items, the number one thing I would recommend first is getting a long barrel for this gun. A longer barrel makes the gun steadier when you shoot, and it won't rise up as quickly. Oddly enough, whether you have a compensator or a silencer on the end of your weapon, it doesn't really change the recoil stats between them very much. So you can choose to have a silencer or a compensator on, or flash hider rather, whatever you prefer more. I would recommend the silencer, one because it looks cool, in my opinion. Other reason is, of course, it suppresses the sound, so at a distance people aren't really sure where they're getting shot from, so that can be super helpful. But you can still go with the flash hider and not lose too much of your recoil stat. At this point, it's really personal preference for what you want on your muzzle. The next thing I would highly recommend is getting something on the lower end. I like this Juno grip, again, just because it looks cool, but you can go with any of these vertical grips that you want. The point is you want to find something that lowers the recoil as much as possible, because when you're shooting, you don't want to be adjusting your mouse for recoil as much as you can. You want to lower the amount of work that you have to do, basically, especially if you're a beginner. So find a lower attachment grip that lowers the recoil as much as you possibly can. Next recommendation for lasers, I would definitely recommend an ANP-EQ15 laser. What this allows for, and you can see it on my guy in the distance here too, it's kind of just going off in the distance. What this allows you to do is when you hip fire, it gives you, the laser is very visible and it gives you a nice reticle as to where your gun is aiming. So when you're going into like a close quarters situation, you have the option to stay in hip fire mode and still fire accurately. You don't have to hit the right mouse button to ADS in every possible situation, and it allows you to just react faster and more efficiently. So ANPEQ laser attachment for your gun. Magazine capacity for this gun, there are kind of two main recommendations that I have. One is, if you're still into 30 round magazines, my only recommendation is basically the one that looks like this. It's just the AR-15 style plastic 30 rounds magazine with nothing else on it, like so. No rubber piece on the bottom or anything. This is the fastest reloading 30 round magazine in the game. Going with any other option will only really slow you down when it comes to reloading. If you think you could deal with a slightly slower reload time but have twice as many bullets in the magazine, I would definitely recommend getting this 60 rounder. This thing is actually super useful in that, you can really just kind of keep spraying accurately at somebody for a very extended period of time and really suppress them in the spot they're in, making this gun almost like an LMG, but a very accurate LMG. So if you're into having high magazine capacity, I would only recommend going with the 60 rounder. 50 rounders are but and they're also heavy, so if you really have to save weight, 60 rounders are actually lighter, which is kind of funny. Also, I've done a video where I play a few matches with 60 rounders, and it is very, very fun. So definitely give these things a try. Ultimately, you want to give everything I'm saying a try before you really make a decision. Don't just take my word for it. Actually take it into a match and try it out, and then make a decision. I've tried 60 rounders and I've tried this quick reload 30 rounder, and I find that I prefer this, but you might prefer the 30 rounder. Give it a try and make a decision for yourself, because ultimately all of these things are pretty much personal preference. Additional ammo, what this is an additional magazine that will appear out of nowhere when you run out of ammo on your screen. It'll appear out of nowhere and boom, you'll have an extra 30 round mag in your gun. I would highly recommend choosing one of these because ammo can run out rather quickly if you're surviving for long periods of time, which I will show you how to do better. But if you survive for long periods of time but you don't have an ammo pack as your gadget, this can come in real handy. And the only recommendation I would make is armor piercing. That's what AP means. You want to be able to penetrate armor more than do some sort of flesh damage. The priority should be penetrating people's armor, because armor can be quite tough in this game, and if you can not have to worry about it, I think that's the best case scenario. So definitely go with AP rounds for your extra mag. Moving on to body parts. Handguards don't really do too much to the weapon stats. These are more for cosmetics and how you want your gun to look. I chose a short handguard because if I chose a longer handguard, the Juno stock kind of extends out this way, and I would rather have it further in. In the current build of the game, I'm not allowed to have this handguard and just manually move this grip backwards. I can't do that currently. If I could, I would, but currently the only one that allows it to be close to the magazine, which is kind of how I like it to look, is the short handguard right here. Up next is the stock. Again, these don't really do too much to the stats, so you can again just choose cosmetically which one you think looks best. And same thing with the pistol grip. Only thing is, if you go with the Juno stock, which by the way, Juno grip and the Juno stock are both based off of this company called Hera Arms, which makes M4 and HK stocks that look just like these. If you go with the Juno stock, you won't need a pistol grip because it acts as a pistol grip right here. But you can just go with the default stock by hitting clear and just run that, and it should be just fine. And that's about it for the HK 416, my preferred gun. As for a secondary gun, there are a few options that you can also have. I definitely recommend that you run this as your primary if you're starting out, with a reflex sight, a laser, and a long barrel, and anything else that you prefer cosmetically. M416 is the way to go for beginners. Now, as for your secondary, there are a few options. I have an RPG because I like to play a lot of Warzone, and in Warzone, people like to use a lot of vehicles. So if I see an enemy vehicle, I can at least do some damage to it quite a bit when I see it. If you're not into sort of the anti-vehicle vibe, and you'd like a secondary in order to shoot actual infantry players, guns that have really wrecked me a lot and my buddy Jam loves are shotguns. So Vepr 12 and MCS, these things can absolutely destroy people when you go into a building, like instantly. So again, I haven't really tried them myself, but yeah, I would imagine you don't even need to mod it that much. I would probably even just take it in like this. Maybe, can I put a laser on it? Can't even put a laser on it, but I don't even think you need one. But yeah, I think you could take this in on just completely unmodded and just run it like this and be completely fine as your secondary. So if you really are into PvP infantry battles, shotguns can definitely be super effective. I haven't used one myself, but I know for a fact that it's been used against me quite effectively. Even at sort of medium range, shotguns can be quite devastating. I think particularly the Vepr 12 right here. But again, give them a try, actually run them into battle as you see fit, and make a decision for yourself. Because ultimately I'm just giving recommendations, but it's up to you to make the decision. I personally am going to stick with my RPG build. The only other thing is, if you're going to go with an RPG, note that it takes up a lot of weight, so you're going to have to sacrifice some things elsewhere, potentially. Now we're going to get into the very, very underrated and very important stuff. Armor and gadgets. Grenades, I would just recommend the frag grenade. It's really all you need. You can use smoke grenades if you think you could use them to tactically move in an open area, but I think for the most part all you really need is a frag grenade. Not even Semtex, just a frag grenade. Normal frag grenade. So now armor. These do take up a lot of weight, but they can be quite useful. Basically, as your weight allows, go with the highest tier armor that you possibly can. At the moment, since I'm running an RPG, I can't go all out with my armor, so I just have a level 2 helmet and a level 3 polyethylene armor. So sort of glass cannon. The time to kill in this game, regardless of armor, is kind of quick, so it's up to you whether you want to invest that much weight into armor. I still would as much as you can, as your weight allows. That's why I talked about armor kind of later, after the guns, because Again, the time to kill in this game is rather quick, so invest in as much armor as you can only after you've figured out what your preferred weapons are. And then as much as you can, as much as your weight allows, go with the highest level armor that you can. Equipment packs. There are a number of gadgets that you can use. This is like a little suicide ground robot drone that you can use. You can drive it up to somebody and then blow it up right next to them. There's a claymore. These have been used quite effectively against me. Obviously, just place them in little corners next to doors where you think people are going to run through, and they do pretty devastating damage right when they walk by them and they explode. Even if they walk past them, it'll absolutely devastate them and even kill them. Med packs, you press F next to these and they'll restore your health. Equipment packs, you press F next to these and they'll restore equipment like RPG rockets and your grenades. That's why I actually use an equipment pack for my loadout, because I use an RPG and I would like to not run out of RPGs if I'm shooting at a tank. Ammo packs, self-explanatory. You can use these to restore the ammo in your gun. And a first aid kit. This is like a quicker way to self-heal or heal an ally. So if you're into quicker heals, this is definitely a good all-around option for beginners. I would recommend either a first aid kit or a med pack as your equipment item if you're first starting out. I run the equipment pack because I kind of have a strategy with my loadout and I really know what I'm doing with it, so I'll stick with that. Those are the only real important gadgets that I would consider. The most important ones being med packs, equipment packs, or ammo packs, and the first aid kit. The other ones are in my opinion. If you're into C4 though, that option is available to you. Now, kill streaks, or point streaks as I like to call them. Kill streaks in this game aren't really kill streaks so much as they are actually point streaks. So what I mean by that is you don't need kills to be able to unlock these in the middle of a match. What you need are points. You can get points by either actually getting kills, but you can also get them by capturing objective points, having squad mates spawn on you, even just dealing damage to an enemy gives you points, etc, etc. It's actually rather easy to get points throughout a match in the game. My number one recommendation is that you use the Barracuda UAV as one of your point streaks. This thing is super useful because it not only acts as radar for a short period of time in a certain area, but it also highlights where the enemies are on your screen, not on your map, but actually where they are in front of you. They'll show up as these bright red rhombuses on your screen, and you'll know exactly where they are. So super helpful before, going into a building or heading into any sort of capture point. As for the others, they can really be anything you want. I prefer artillery, but you can also go with airstrikes or bombing runs. In my opinion, you don't even really need a third kill streak, but you can choose. If you are going with a third, I would recommend picking one of these vehicles. Basically, if you get enough points, you can actually spawn in your own vehicle. It'll airdrop in the middle of the map, and you can just get in it and run it until it dies or the game ends, which is super nice. But again, if you're really more into infantry battles as I am, radar and maybe artillery strikes, whatever your personal preference is. But again, my number one recommendation is the Barracuda radar. Okay, so now I've hopped into an empty Warzone server, since the game in its current build, once again, does not allow for offline servers. If you want to practice things or warm up in any way, you kind of have to enter an online server right off the bat. The first choice you're going to have once you enter a match is attacker or defender. It really doesn't matter. I would recommend attackers since you really want to be mobile in a Warzone match and capturing other people's points as much as possible. All this really means is whichever one you choose, and you can change mid-match if you want, like so, but I believe it's mid-match. I don't know if I can just change just because the game hasn't even started yet, but basically all this means is if you're defending a point, you'll get slightly more points than if you were attacking a point. And then if you choose attacker, you'll get slightly more points if you're attacking a point versus defending a point. So now what's nice here is you can choose a class. You can't change your guns or attachments mid-match or your armor, but you can sort of change your grenade and what type of equipment you want to bring in mid-match. So we'll go ahead and spawn in here. If the game was actually going, this would say deploy instead of warm up, but since the game hasn't really started yet, we'll just go ahead and hit warm up. Okay, right when you spawn in, first you want to hit T on your keyboard. And what that'll do is activate your laser, like so. And now you kind of have a hipfire reticle that you can use. Technically you do have a reticle off the get-go. It's not going to look very visible on YouTube since I can only record in 720p. But in the very center of your screen there is like a little slightly transparent gray dot at the center of your screen. And you can kind of use that to aim if you want. But having a laser not only looks cool, but it also makes your reticle kind of more visible. Also, it shows exactly where your gun is pointing. Your gun is not always pointing exactly at the center of your screen. If you see the guy's gun is kind of swaying around naturally, even as you walk left and right, it varies. So having a laser show you exactly where it's pointing can be super useful. First off, a little movement hack. Obviously, you hold shift to run. I'm holding shift with my pinky. I lean on the control button with my pinky, and that'll cause my character to slide. So if you're running a really heavy loadout like I am, this is a way to kind of make your character hard to hit, and also a little more mobile than they would be otherwise. It is a slightly faster way to move if your character is really, really heavy. And not to mention, it's a good way to just, you know, slide into cover real fast. The one thing you want to be careful with is once you hit control and slide, your character is actually crouch running now. So you want to hit control again to stand up, and then you hit control again to slide, and then control again to stand up, control to slide. Control to stand up, control to slide, etc, etc. So just be aware of that. Now as for practicing your aim, first tip when it comes to aiming is you want to lower your sensitivity a lot. So a lot of people like to go into these games and then use a high sensitivity thinking that's the way to go. I can tell you right now, having played a couple of years of CSGO and a few years in general of playing first-person shooters, in general, lower is better when it comes to sensitivity. If you hit escape, go to settings and then controls, at the very top you'll have look sensitivity and look ADS sensitivity. I would just run the same number for both of these and then just get used to it. And that sort of plays into why I kind of use 1x reflex sights, because the sensitivity doesn't feel like it changes that much when using reflex sights. But if you notice, this scale can go all the way up to 200, but I have it set to just 21. Now how did I come up with this number? What you want to do is, again, find another wall, and you're just going to kind of aim at a point. If you can't find a point, then just like shoot a dot at the wall. But here we kind of have a little window opening in this medieval structure that we can use. And what you want to do is just aim at this point, and without crossing this line, basically you don't want to get too close. You want to just strafe back and forth while aiming at that point. And you want to be able to track it. I'll turn off the laser as well, because you really only want to focus on that center dot on your screen. You want to be able to track this point as best as you possibly can. I'll leave a link to this guy named Corehaven, who made a sensitivity guide for CSGO, which is basically what I'm doing right now. The idea is if you can track a target like so from about these medium distances very comfortably, then your sensitivity is just right. Basically, you want to keep your center dot on this window as closely as you possibly can for the entire time that you're strafing. And basically, you want to raise or lower your sensitivity as you see fit to make that tracking as comfortable as possible. That's the very basic overview of that process of finding your perfect sensitivity. But the Corehaven video that I'm going to leave in the description is the more in-depth scientific way of figuring that out. And 21 is not what I used in CSGO, but I went with 21 in this game because it feels the most like my CSGO sensitivity. So once you've figured this out, we're gonna head to a wall like so. So what you want to do first is aim center, just straight at the wall, then you're gonna aim down and make a bullet hole. Also for this, you want to hit N to go into single shot. Aim down, shoot a hole. Aim up, shoot a hole. And what you're going to do is you're going to aim up and down and try to shoot into that same bullet hole over and over again, like so. And you alternate. And it won't be perfect, but you want to try and get as close as you possibly can, as quickly as you can, each time. You do that for about a clip and a half. And then, if you can guess, now you're going to do side to side. So if that makes sense, you're going to basically be trying to shoot into the same hole from side to side for about a clip and a half. Make sure it's even between up and down and side to side. Now, my guy looks like he only has one mag left. He really has two, because again, we have that extra mag that we added on in the loadout screen. So with these last two mags, what you're going to do is kind of try to flow between these 4 points. So now you're not just aiming up and down or side to side. You're going to do kind of all of it as you see fit. You kind of flow between each point like so. As quickly as you... And there's the extra mag that we use. So you want to do it as quickly as you can and as precisely as you can. And it can be completely random. You want to flow between these 4 points and have it be completely random. But you want to sort of just, connect as much as you can. It's sort of like a flow that you want to have. By the way, none of this is, you're not using your arm for any of this. You want to be making sure that you're only using your wrist when you do this. Other miscellaneous tips are, let's say you're running to an objective. There's a lot of dead time here on your mouse when you're aiming. You're not really active with your aim while you're just running to an objective. The nature of Warzone is passive. The nature of a sort of deathmatch or training is active when it comes to you aiming with your mouse. So if you ever watch me play, you'll see me as I'm either holding a corner or running to an objective. You'll see me doing something like this with my aim. What I'm doing is just flicking my mouse around with my wrist a little bit as time goes on, or as I'm waiting for somebody to peek out, just so that my wrist is still active. My wrist is still awake, if you will, while I'm trying to aim. It doesn't fall asleep, and my reaction times can stay quick because my wrist is active. If you just leave your mouse like this as you wait for someone to peek out, or if you're just not really touching your mouse that much as you run to an objective, you're creating a lot of dead time for your hand. You want to make sure your hand stays active as you're running, or as you're waiting for somebody. Like so. And again, it allows your hand to stay awake, so to speak, so that if somebody does show up on your screen all of a sudden, you can just, just flick right to them and wreck them, This is a tip that I learned from Stewie2K and his teammate Jordan Nothing Gilbert. These two were professional CSGO players for the team Cloud9. Stewie2K was somebody who would hold a corner and do exactly this. And viewers of his stream and even other players on his team would think he was aim hacking or something. Because what are you doing, right? You're just looking at an area and you're just moving your mouse? What are you doing? What he's doing is keeping his wrist active so that he doesn't have to think when somebody actually peeks out of a corner, And I found that this was probably the most effective thing for me when it came to actually aiming at enemies in a passive environment, which is like CSGO competitive or a Warzone match, instead of like just deathmatch in another video game. Now, for the actual game, Warzone in World War III is not like Warzone in Call of Duty. The Call of Duty Warzone is like a battle royale type of game mode. Warzone in World War III is more akin to Conquest in Battlefield. So when you first open up your map and look at where you'd like to go, at first you're going to think, okay, there's kind of 6 flags that my team has to capture. But in reality, it's actually only 3. So if you notice, there's an Alpha area, a Bravo area, and a Charlie area. In order for your team to start earning points, you need to capture pairs. You can't just have one or the other, you need to have a pair to start earning points. If you only have Alpha 1 but your enemy has Alpha 2, this area isn't going to be doing anything for you. You need to have a pair in order to start earning points. So, if at the start of the game you go and capture Alpha 1 because your enemy is elsewhere, make sure that your next destination is Alpha 2, because you want to capture this pair as fast as possible so that you can start earning points as fast as possible. The other mechanic that this creates is in Battlefield Conquest, if you knew an enemy was taking A2, for instance, you could spawn directly on A2 so long as you still had it, and spawn on top of that guy and try to kill him instantly. In World War III, it's a little different. Even if you have A2, as soon as an enemy starts to capture A2, you cannot spawn on A2. You cannot spawn right on top of this guy and try to stop him instantly. But, and again, this is why it's important to have a pair, if you own the entire alpha area, both A1 and A2, and someone starts capturing A2, you won't be able to spawn on A2, but if you have A1, you can spawn right here and try to stop that guy from taking A2 as quickly as possible. Because notice that A1 is really the closest spawn point to A2 other than your actual spawn. A better example is the Charlie area. If C1 was getting captured away from you, but you had C2, would you spawn at your spawn or would you spawn at C2 to recapture C1? You would spawn at C2 because it's closer. Again, this is why you want a pair. It allows for easier defense of the area. So it's an interesting sort of gameplay feature that World War III has that other games don't, that I think is quite unique and challenging in its own way. The goal is to capture pairs, not just single points. Now, my number one tip for Warzone matches like these is actually a Sun Tzu quote, which is, avoid what is strong, attack what is weak. It's very straightforward, and to some it may even sound like well, duh, that's pretty obvious, right? But it's actually extremely effective in war games like these. Let's say there's a big battle happening over here at B, and your team's trying to capture B2, but the enemy's defending it really well, and they're trying to capture B1, and you don't want them to capture B1. It's very easy to focus your attention on B when that's happening, because you want your PvP, you want to assert dominance on the other players, you want to show that you're better than them. But actually, what that means is B2 is a very strong area at that time of the game for your enemy. And actually, it might be better to just avoid it altogether, because while they're all here focused on B2, nobody might be over here at C2. Let's say your enemy has C1 and C2. Well, they're all focused here at B. You could maybe spawn at A2 and try to run over to C2 and capture this while your enemy is focused at B2, because nobody's going to be here. Why would you ever try to capture an area where your enemies are when you can just capture an area where your enemies aren't? And you'll find that while they were all focused here, you could snatch away C while they're so focused at B. Or let's say you had C and and the fight was happening at A, you could sneak away B while the fight is happening at A. So that sort of thinking needs to come into play, and that's kind of why this tip is so useful in war games like these. Avoid what is strong, attack what is weak. So I'll see if I can go into a real Warzone match and try to explain this thought process in an actual game, if that would help. And that could definitely be another video that I could make. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see something like that. But as of now, that actually ends the Ultimate Beginner's Guide for World War III. Let me know in the comments if you found this useful. If you like this sort of content, I have a lot more content of me just fragging out in games like these. If you like this sort of content, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe if you really liked it, and be sure to hit that bell notification so you don't miss a single upload. I want to thank you all so much for watching. My name is Zarir, and I'll see you all next time in the server.